The oldest two-story brick structure in Southern California was built right here in San Diego. It's better known as the Whaley House and is designated as a National Historical Landmark located in Old Town. Thomas Whaley built it in 1856, and his family continued living here until 1953. While the Whaleys lived in the house, Thomas had created it with the intention of establishing a center for activity and business. Throughout the years, it served as a courthouse, a general store, and a theater. Between Thomas and his wife Anna, they had 6 children: Francis Hinton, Thomas Jr., Anna Amelia, George Hay Ringgold, Violette Eloise, and Corinne Lillian. The eldest child, Francis, or Frank, became a notary public for San Diego County in 1884 and was instrumental in later years for the restoration and preservation of the Whaley House as a historical site. In 1912, he opened the courthouse to the public as a museum. His sign says 1854, even though the Whaley House wasn't built until 2 years later. Perhaps Frank labeled it to coincide with his own birth year. Thomas Jr. sadly caught scarlet fever and died at the age of 17 months. He was buried at the Protestant cemetery to the west of Old Town. The following decades saw the construction and growth of New Town, which was centered around the Gaslamp Quarter of today. New Town was built by Alonzo Horton, pictured here in 1884 with his wife and mansion in New Town. It would draw many families away from Old Town, moving their relatives' graves along with them. The Protestant cemetery became forgotten, and the land was used as a dog pound, a goat farm, and a trash dump. A handful of graves remained, and almost 1 century later, a gravesite of Thomas Jr. was transferred to Mount Hope Cemetery prior to the construction of Interstate 5 over the land where the Protestant cemetery once stood. In 1882, the old mission bells most likely rang for a double wedding that was held at the Whaley House in the background. It was for sisters Anna Amelia and Violette Eloise. Anna Amelia married her first cousin, John T. Whaley. They later moved to Modesto, California, and she would be the only sibling who died outside of San Diego. Violette Eloise married George T. Bertolacci. He turned out to be a charlatan, trying to marry into the Whaley family's wealth. He left 2 weeks after the wedding, and Violette was thrown into bouts of depression from the deception itself, as well as embarrassment from the subsequent divorce. Early in the morning on August 18, 1885, she shot herself in the chest in the backyard. Her father brought her into the parlor of the Whaley House, but it was too late. Violette was a talented musician and was remembered as an artist by her siblings. She left a note with a poem by Thomas Hood. It read, "Mad from life's history, glad to death's mystery, swift to be hurled anywhere, anywhere out of the world." Violette Eloise was only 22 years old. Considering the trying times we are going through, be sure to check on the mental health of others. George Hay Ringgold Whaley wanted to become a professional musician against his father's wishes. He taught himself to play the violin and left the Whaley House at the age of 19, allegedly to avoid abuse from his father. He began working downtown playing the violin and made his first public appearance at Horton Hall in 1880. Named after its benefactor Alonzo Horton, Horton Hall was San Diego's first theater and could seat 400 people comfortably with another 200 chairs if needed. Opened in 1869, it hosted meetings, shops, variety shows, the Philharmonic Society of San Diego, and even comic opera like Gilbert and Sullivan's HMS Pinafore. Horton Hall burned in 1897 and was then torn down. The last of the Whaley children, Corinne Lillian, was a school teacher and a librarian. She also took voice lessons to become an opera singer. She was the last Whaley family member to live in the Whaley House until 1953. The Whaley House is advertised as America's most haunted house. Several members of the Whaley family died within its walls. Toward the back of the house is a replica of a jail cell. Prior to the building of the Whaley House, the property was the location of the gallows where Yankee Jim Robinson was hung for stealing a boat. His soul is said to haunt the Whaley House, and this cell is similar to where he was held before his trial and execution. If you want to hear more detail of Yankee Jim's story, search for and watch the San Diego Review of Old Town after this one. The deaths in this location are said to have confined their spirits in and around the Whaley House. On the subject of paranormal activity, recent polls show roughly 40 to 60% of Americans believe in ghosts. 100 years ago, the magazine Scientific American offered $5,000 for scientific proof that ghosts really do exist. The world had just battled through World War I and was recovering from an influenza pandemic. Together, these events took the lives of over 41 million people. That's higher than the entire population of California, the most populous state in the United States. There was a need in the world to know if an afterlife existed, not just for those who died, but as a comfort for family members who survived. Spirit boards were purchased, and mediums held parlor seances to communicate with the recently departed. Ghosts were said to make their presence known by speaking or making noise, or being seen, felt, or smelled by an observer. Some apparitions, called poltergeists, could create physical disturbances, making loud sounds and moving or destroying objects. Two famous friends represented the state of paranormal rejection and paranormal acceptance during the early years of the 20th century: Harry Houdini and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Doyle was a medical doctor and author of the master detective stories of Sherlock Holmes. He was a skeptic of spiritualism, but gradually believed in it more and more, as credible evolutionists, chemists, and astronomers also began to accept the growing possibility of contacting spirits of the dead. Harry Houdini was an escape artist and magician. He challenged police to lock him up and performed his escape acts while hanging from a rope, being submerged underwater, or enclosed in a milk container. He always performed as a professional and knew the tricks of the trade used by magicians to amaze audiences. In 1922, Arthur Conan Doyle's wife, Jean, who considered herself a medium and spiritualist, offered to meet with Harry Houdini and contact his mother, who had died nearly a decade earlier. She claimed to have channeled his mother's spirit, who controlled Jean's hand and pen, producing a lengthy 15-page message for Houdini. The automatic or spirit writing was in grammatically correct English, with the sign of a religious cross drawn at the top. This raised Harry Houdini's suspicions, as his mother didn't know how to write in English, and the cross would be a strange symbol for her, the wife of a Jewish rabbi. In addition to this, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle genuinely believed and publicly claimed Harry Houdini himself was a spiritualist and medium, who could dematerialize his body in order to escape the various locks, chains, and contraptions in his escape acts. Houdini spoke out against this, and the friendship between Arthur and Harry would gradually tear itself apart. Houdini had particular disdain for psychics and mediums, who, in his eyes, provided the fabricated illusion of communication with the dead in exchange for real money from grieving families. Here, he demonstrates how a spirit photograph with Abraham Lincoln could be faked in 1925. This ignited an ironic crusade for an escape artist and magician. He would spend the final years of his life disproving false prophets and mediums, invalidating their claims to reach into the afterlife. Harry Houdini agreed to be part of Scientific American's carefully chosen committee to challenge anyone that could scientifically prove the existence of ghosts. It was moderated by a team of 2 scientists, 2 psychics, and Harry Houdini. Most of the mediums, supported by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, refused to take part in the study. If they could truly perform what they claimed, why would they pass up an opportunity to earn $5,000 from Scientific American magazine? Contestants who did show up were promptly shown to be charlatans and swindlers. The search for confirmation of ghostly contact continued for another year without scientific success. Then one day, Scientific American came across a medium in Boston. She was married to a prominent and well-respected surgeon. Her name was Mina Marjorie Crandon, and she neither charged money for her seances nor seemed to have any self-serving motive for holding them. She conducted several seances to prove the existence of ghosts to the committee. They held hands around a table in complete darkness, and she proceeded to make contact with her deceased brother, Walter. Bells rang, a cabinet fell, and the table was lifted and turned over. Houdini was not convinced and exposed the means by which she rang the bell with her foot, tipped the cabinet with a free hand by distracting the person next to her, and used her head to flip the table on its side. Remember, they were in complete darkness, but Houdini used his sense of touch to discover how she performed her tricks. Just as with all the previous contestants, Houdini declared her a fraud. On Halloween in 1926, Harry Houdini died. History says he was punched in the abdomen, not by the professional boxer Jack Dempsey, pictured here, but by a student who wanted to see if Houdini was as tough as everyone thought. The cause of death was a burst appendix with peritonitis from bacterial infection spreading into his abdominal cavity. Houdini had been feeling ill even before he was punched, and continued performing, ignoring his weakness and 102-degree fever. His own stubbornness and pride would seal his fate. By the time surgery was performed, it was too late. Angry spirit mediums had foreseen his death and quickly claimed credit when he coincidentally died on Halloween. The very thing Houdini fought against in the final years of his life was used in an attempt to contact him by his wife. Bess Houdini held seances every year on Halloween for 10 years in hopes of communicating with Harry. As much as Bess wanted to hear from her husband, Harry Houdini silently proved there was no communication with the afterlife, only the good memories they had together. By 1941, the prize money offered by Scientific American grew to $15,000 for anyone who could scientifically prove the existence of ghosts. No one has ever claimed the distinction before or since. Even though the Whaley House is known for its paranormal experiences, one of its rooms is dedicated to facts and tangible evidence. When San Diego County outgrew its single-room courthouse, a second courthouse was rented for $65 a month from the Whaley family at their residence. The room was originally constructed as a granary and served as a county courthouse from 1868 to 1871. Judges would travel by horseback to hear cases in San Diego, Los Angeles, and San Bernardino. The accommodations are a little cramped. but there is room for the judge, jury, and parties, as well as a small area for others in attendance. In May of 2022, the San Diego Superior Court held 4 official court sessions at the Whaley House, 151 years after it was last used in 1871. The Honorable Judge Whitney reinstated the Whaley House as a courthouse for one day. He had the idea, after visiting the Whaley House, to obtain 2 bricks from its courthouse structure to be included in a time capsule for the new criminal courthouse downtown, which opened in 2017. The Whaleys had a general store set adjacent to the courthouse. In the years the courthouse was active, a lot of foot traffic naturally walked over to browse and purchase items when the court was not in session. They traded items in the general store for cattle, hides, wool, and country produce. Typical products sold were groceries, provisions, liquor, tobacco, clothing, hardware, cutlery, and carpets. Thomas Whaley had a business slogan: quick returns, small profits. In setting up the general store, Thomas Whaley had a partner by the name of Philip Crosswaite. He had served as deputy sheriff when Yankee Jim Robinson was convicted of grand larceny and executed in 1852 on the spot where the Whaley House now stands. On the wall is an example of the liquor license Thomas Whaley purchased for $15 in order to sell alcohol from October 1870 to January 1871. Thomas Whaley was born in New York City and ventured west during the gold rush of 1849. In a letter to his mother, he wrote, "God speed me to the distant land toward which my future hopes are centered, and grant a fair realization of my wishes." Upon arrival, Whaley was quick to establish his own businesses, including a brickyard, real estate, and general stores like this one in the Whaley House. He became involved in local politics and had strong relations in both San Francisco and San Diego. These achievements earned him a Certificate of Life membership in the Society of California Pioneers. The small pantry contains more goods and provisions that were offered by the general store. The flickering electric lanterns recreate how things may have appeared prior to the spread of electrical lights in the late 1800s. The general store measures 12 by 24 feet. From here, the door on the left opens to the main hallway that leads us to the front doors of the Whaley House. Between the general store and the dining room is a modest connecting room which has a small offering set up for the lady of the house, Anna Whaley. On the opposite side from her is a painting appropriate for the time period by J.F. Ryder called "Hare is Caught," with 2 children crashing out of a wagon while the dog pulling them catches a rabbit. Below that are teapots, plates, and tableware glimmering on the shelves in the simulated candlelight. Walking through, we find ourselves in the dining room with its chandelier and photos of the Whaley family on the walls. Next to the passage to the general store are more photos and an undersized door with a wreath. Measuring 12 by 14 feet, the dining room isn't the largest for a family the size of the Whaleys, although it has enough room for people to walk around the dining table and access the general store. Connected to the dining room window is an 8 by 12 foot space for the kitchen. The Whaleys had lived in San Francisco for a time and hired a Chinese cook that came with them to San Diego. The cook prepared their meals here and would also use the area as living quarters. Kumeyaay men helped Thomas Whaley construct the house, and a Kumeyaay girl helped with domestic chores, but supposedly kept running away. Exiting from the back of the dining room, we enter the main hallway with its marble tiles and staircase leading to the upstairs rooms. Behind us, we can examine the quality of wood used for the French doors that open to the backyard. To the right of these doors is a guest bedroom. The guest bedroom has a banner detailing the origins of the Whaley family. They are traced back to Wyamaris Whaley, who was knighted by William the Conqueror for his services in the Battle of Hastings in 1066. He was granted the lordship of Whalley in Lancaster County, England. Their last name was often spelled with one or two L's interchangeably. Near the end of the 13th century, Whalley Abbey was built by 20 monks. It would become the second wealthiest monastery in Lancashire. Today, only the foundations of the church remain, but here is how the gateway to Whalley Abbey appears, remarkably as it is, in the drawing on the banner. The Whalley coat of arms has 3 whales' heads emerging from the water. There is also a framed representation of the Whalley coat of arms from 1965 hanging on the wall. Richard Whalley, born in 1499, has a tomb where his statue rests its head upon a whale. The first Whalleys to come to America made the voyage across the ocean to arrive in Plymouth, Massachusetts in 1772. In all, 16 families existed between Wyremaris Whalley of Lancaster, England, and Thomas Whalley of San Diego. Thomas Whalley was set up by his parents to run the family business when he came of age. His father died when he was only 9 years old, and his will declared that Thomas will be given the best education available in order to succeed in business and in life. He went to boarding school in Connecticut and afterwards attended at Washington Institute. He graduated with honors and studied under a tutor for 2 years in Europe. When he returned to America, he took over his father's businesses and managed his mother's rental properties. Inside one of the cases is a vest and tie along with a top hat that represents the style of clothes Thomas Whalley would likely have worn. Anna Eloise Delaunay met her future husband Thomas in New York when he rented a room from her mother. Anna was a talented musician and played the piano, guitar, and melodeon. We'll see this last instrument in a few minutes. A black dress on display portrays the type of clothes typically worn by Anna. With the death of Thomas Jr. and Violette, she spent much time in mourning. The china coffee pots and engraved tableware are evidence the Whalley family was financially secure. In an adjacent display case, the pieces in front show the tea set for their daughter's dolls were also of higher quality. Here are other possessions like the brooches and earrings of Anna Whalley, a pair of satin heels, a carving set, and the block and gavel from the courthouse. Thomas Whalley spoke of his family's prosperity in relation to how enjoyable a life he could provide for his wife. In his own words, he said, "My wife has every comfort and luxury I can afford to give her, and we enjoy ourselves to the envy of many. My parlor is furnished with Brussels carpet and mahogany and rosewood furniture. We frequently have musical soirees, and our house is the resort of most of the best people in the place. My wife is the best little woman in the world, loved by all. She is proficient in music, plays, and sings." Back in the main hallway, we see the staircase on one side of the 6-foot-wide corridor, and on the other, a straight hallway with light coming in from the front doors of the Whalley house. On our left is the parlor and study room. The Whalleys were a musical family and most likely spent much of their time in this area of the house. This is the view from the study looking into the parlor. A photo of Violette Eloise is on the wall, with a dedication that describes her as refined and intelligent, and a passionate lover of the beautiful in nature. She also worshipped the arts, and music was her passion. This is where the Whalleys would entertain their guests. There is a melodeon or pump organ at the center of the parlor next to the fireplace. The photos and couches give a warm feeling of invitation for family and friends. Entering from the front doors, we see the main hallway which runs the length of the house. To the right is the parlor we just saw, and after it is the study. Let's look upstairs. In 1871, court trials were moved downtown, and it's said an angry mob held Anna Whaley at gunpoint on the 9th step of these stairs in order to remove public records from the house. Thomas Whaley fought to keep the trials because not only did the city owe him rent money, but he knew he'd be losing patronage to his general store. From the top of the stairs, we turn to the right to see one of the upstairs bedrooms. Examining this room, nothing seems out of the ordinary. No specters or strange stacking of books, or portals to other realms. The Whaley house seems to be as normal as any other house. Looking in this room, however, there are several mirrors which leads us to other stories of superstition and the supernatural. Why does breaking a mirror result in 7 years bad luck? Mirrors are plates of clean, polished glass, with a layer of tin and silver attached to the back for reflectivity. We see ourselves in a mirror's reflection, and because of this, it was thought that part of an observer's soul is held within the mirror. Breaking a mirror could break or trap the reflected soul, causing bad luck to fall upon the person in the real world. In many cultures, 7 is normally a lucky number, and the 7 years of bad luck comes from the ancient Romans' belief that a life is renewed every 7 years. In Western culture, in order to counter the bad luck, a person needs to touch a shard of the broken mirror to a tombstone, or grind the pieces into a fine powder. Mirrors are often covered after a death in the family. It's to prevent demons or evil spirits from revealing themselves, to shield the departed soul from its physical body, or ward off death for those who have survived. If we look out the rear window on the 2nd floor, we see it's an overcast rainy day that requires the use of an umbrella. Why is it bad luck to open an umbrella indoors? 4,000 years ago, ancient civilizations invented parasols as protection from the sun. They were mainly used by nobility or royalty. In ancient Egypt, it was considered an insult to the sun god to open an umbrella indoors. In 18th century England, umbrellas were built with sturdy metal spokes, which could be dangerous if opened in the confines of a home. Other than poking someone else in the head or eyeball, there doesn't seem to be a direct connection to bad luck if an umbrella is opened indoors. In fact, in the United States, one day in March is National Open an Umbrella Indoors Day. People are encouraged to open an umbrella indoors and see if it changes their fortunes on March 13th. The 13th is thought of as a sinister day when it falls on a Friday. In Western culture, why is the number 13 considered unlucky? According to the Otis Elevator Company, 85% of the elevators they have installed in skyscrapers and tall hotels do not have a 13th floor. Note how this car operating panel has a floor 12A instead. How does the fear of the number 13, or triskaidekaphobia, influence whether or not they install a number 13 button label? The elevator manufacturer and the building owner may not believe the superstition. However, the focus is on the passenger or customer riding the elevator or staying at the hotel. As with many good businesses, the customer is always right. One favorable example for the number 13 is the baker's dozen. Instead of 12, they give you 13. Isn't 13 the unlucky number? Why is there 13 in the baker's dozen? Back in medieval England, which included the 13th century, bakers who sold 12 loaves of bread would throw in an extra 13th loaf to save themselves from punishment. The price of bread was controlled by the price of wheat. Most bakers didn't have a scale to measure the weight of dough, and the sizes would vary depending on the baking method and air. Whether intentional or not, If a baker was shorting their customers' loaves, they could be fined, flogged, or placed in a pillory. A 13th loaf, or vantage loaf, was included in the baker's dozen as insurance. Sometimes a 14th loaf was provided to be extra careful. A baker in modern times won't be reprimanded, but they continue the tradition of giving 13 instead of 12 as an act of goodwill to attract customers. One of the upstairs rooms has been remodeled to showcase items and methods from archaeological excavations conducted on the Whaley House property. The majority of items were found by SDSU from 2008 to 2012. They concentrated their efforts where the Whaley's well and outhouse were located in the backyard. Here are things we expect to see from a general store, like bottles of lime cola, Dr. Pepper, and Heinz ketchup. There's also a few shotgun shells and doorknobs. Some household items are plates and utensils from the dining room. There's a ceramic fragment with Napoleon's portrait and a small toothbrush on the lower left. In 1973, the San Diego Gem and Treasure Club found a few items like an animal figurine and some keys amongst other items. Exiting the room, we see the railing and stairs immediately outside the door. Turning to the left and looking in the adjacent bedroom shows it is set up for the Whaley family children. We learned earlier that Thomas Jr. died of scarlet fever in 1858. About the same time, a fire broke out in the general store downstairs, ruining part of the house. The Whaleys decided it was time for a change and moved to San Francisco that same year. It would be 10 years before they returned to San Diego. By the time they did, their family had grown with 3 more children, for a total of 7 family members, minus Thomas Jr. Thomas Whaley had invested in stock during their time in San Francisco and had secured enough financial stability to fix up the damage from the fire and bring the family back down to San Diego in 1868. Thomas was supremely entrepreneurial, and in October of that year, he had another business venture for the Whaley House. This room is on the second floor across from the top of the stairs. Thomas Whaley had it converted into a theater for vaudeville, a combination of singing, comedy, drama, and dancing. He had a staircase added to the front balcony just behind these windows for guests to access the theater. Thomas Whaley leased the top floor and his corral to Thomas W. Tanner for $20. The Whaley House Theater had its first performance by the Tanner Troupe on December 2nd, 1868. The theater had enough seating for 150 people in the audience section. Considering the size of the room and the proximity to the stage, they would have been packed together tightly. There may not have been too many complaints, as Old Town did not have an official theater at the time. Unfortunately, just days after opening, the manager Thomas W. Tanner died. After only 2 performances, the Tanner Troupe disbanded. The view from the balcony gives us the Old Town Saloon and the Old Town Mexican Cafe across San Diego Avenue. Let's go back down the stairs to have a look around the exterior of the Whaley House. Here is the front porch of the Whaley House, what most visitors will see walking along the main street. Looking west, we see a smaller building which has restrooms in the backyard. The red wall on the southeast side of the Whaley House is hard to miss. At the rear of the Whaley House, we walk past the guest bedroom and see the double doors that open into the center hallway. To the right is a door that leads into the kitchen. Further on, behind the courtroom, is the holding cell for trials. At the back of the house is a horse-drawn carriage. similar to what the Whaleys would have owned. Next to this wagon wheel is the small door we saw in the dining room that leads out to the backyard. The Whaley House is advertised as America's most haunted house, with over a 160-year history in Old Town San Diego. There are many intriguing stories to be discovered. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, the Whaley House will still exist even after we've become ghosts ourselves, or at least fond memories in the minds of future generations. If you enjoyed this video, help support this channel to grow for free. Please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching San Diego Review.